Welcome back to Spike on the Mic. Today I'm continuing with my series on hot button debate topics in the Commander community. I'm doing this so you know where I stand on these topics, so you can see where I agree with the community or the rules committee and where I don't. If you haven't seen the first few episodes in this series, you should definitely give them a listen before continuing with this one. The first episode is about my role on the Commander Advisory Group, and the second episode is about things that make Commander unique and different from other formats. Today I'm going to do a deep dive into a topic that seems to come up every time people gather to talk about changes to the format. Without fail, there's always at least a few people out there who want to increase the number of poison counters that it takes to kill someone in Commander. I'm Jim, I'm your Spike on the Mic, and today we're going to talk about Infect. As of today, Infect is governed by Comprehensive Rule 702.89b, and I quote, "Damage dealt to a player by a source with Infect doesn't cause that player to lose life. Rather, it causes that source's controller to give the player that many poison counters. See Rule 120.3, unquote." That's not really the part that's contentious, though. When people talk about changing how Infect works in Commander, they're usually referring to 704.5c, and I quote, "If a player has 10 or more poison counters, that player loses the game. Ignore this rule in two-headed giant games. See Rule 704.6b instead." Unquote. We're not really talking about two-headed giant today, but just for fun, let's see what that rule says. And I quote, "In a two-headed giant game, if a team has 15 or more poison counters, that team loses the game. See Rule 810, two-headed giant variant." Unquote. It's kind of strange that the comprehensive rules carve out a different lose condition for that specific format, right? With a little bit of scrutiny, we might come to the conclusion that two-headed giants' life totals are 50% higher than they are in 1v1 formats. You start at 30. That is to say that it's 50% harder to kill someone because you have to deal 50% more damage. Bingo bango, apply the same concept, and we determine that you should have to do 50% more work to kill someone with Infect as well. Commander starts at 40 life. As I mentioned in the last episode of Spike on the Mic, it's one of the things that makes Commander different. It's a feature of the format and not a bug. That's 100% more than 1v1 formats. If we take that to mean that you should have to do 100% more work to kill someone, it stands to reason that there should be an exception carved out under 704.6 stating that you need 20 poison counters to kill them. Makes sense, right? For the purposes of this episode, I'm going to refer to this concept as the change, or the proposed change. But I want to add a big ol' asterisk right here. I don't know if anyone on the rules committee is seriously considering this kind of a change, and I'm not allowed to share the direct conversations I might have had about it. The content of this episode is purely my own opinion, and it's a summary of the arguments I would make if this sort of thing were to come up behind closed doors. With that out of the way, let's dive into what I think about this proposed change. First up, let's talk about scaling, because I think that's really what this is all about. It's a fact that the multiplayer nature of the format and the higher life totals make some cards worse and some cards better. In fact, if we were to consider something like Lava Axe, which deals 5 damage to a player, it's considerably worse in Commander. Not only do you have to cast 8 of them to bring a single player down to 0 life, you've got 3 players to kill instead of just 1. Contrast that to 1v1 formats where you could cast 4 of them and then shuffle up for game 2. On the flip side, casting Grey Merchant of Asphodel into an empty board is a lot better in Commander than it is in 1v1 formats. It'll gain you 6 life instead of just 2. It's a fact of the format, and by design in fact, that the rules of Commander change how effective some cards are. For some that's a benefit, like with Ad Nauseam or Necropotence, and for others not so much. Just ask Biovisionary and Hedron Alignment how they feel about the Singleton rule. For Infect cards in particular, the poison counter win condition being fixed at 10 appears to make them twice as effective, right? As it turns out, a lot of Infect's potency comes from being able to run multiples of some cards like you can in other formats. In total, in the whole of Magic, there's about 60 to 70 cards that play with Infect. They're either creatures with Infect, things that make creatures with Infect, spells or permanents that gives things Infect, or give people poison counters. Now, that's not to say that there are 60 to 70 good cards on the list. Trigon of Infestation, as an example, will cost you 4 mana for the privilege of making 1/1 tokens, at a rate of an additional 2 mana each, and you can only make one per turn. Woof. If you're playing 1v1 formats or even two-headed giant, the ability to run multiple copies of the good cards like Glistener Elf or Phyrexian Crusader drastically increases the average card quality of your deck. In Commander, to pull together a cohesive Infect theme, you're probably pulling in the best 15 or so cards and supporting it with things like proliferation and combat tricks. This means that a large portion of your deck is contingent on having creatures on the board and or being able to land the first poison counter on an opponent. If you're unable to do either of those things for whatever reason, you're drawing dead like 85% of the time. But that's not the only thing that mitigates Infect's potency in Commander. Being a multiplayer free-for-all format, when you're dealing damage that causes loss of life, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. If one of your opponents attacks one of your other opponents, they're moving themselves closer to winning the game, but they're also moving you closer. The same goes for fetch lands, shocks, and other incidental damage. It can really add up over the course of a game. You probably would have had to deal that damage anyway, and now someone's gone and done it for you. When you're playing Infect, that's simply not the case. You're operating on your own axis of interaction, and unless your opponents are actually taking each other out of the game, or you're lucky enough to have another Infect player at the table, you've got to do 100% of the heavy lifting on your own, every time. So it's my contention that although the higher life total in Commander makes Infect stronger in relative terms than it is in other formats, the singleton and multiplayer free-for-all rules actually do a fair bit to rein it in. That's not the only reason I'm against this kind of a change, though. I personally believe that the Commander Rules Committee should only make functional changes like this when they solve an actual real-world problem that people have. When they changed the way the Command Zone replacement effect worked, it brought the rule in line with how a lot of players already thought the rule worked and resolved a lot of disagreements and feel-bads at Commander tables around the world. It opened up card design space for new commanders and deck design space for existing ones. In short, it actually accomplished quite a few positive things for the format. Although I think the proposed change on the surface at least might make some academic sense to a lot of people, I don't think it has that kind of positive real-world effect. It's already a pretty tough strategy to build for and pilot, and doubling the size of the mountain it has to climb essentially relegates those 60 to 70 cards to being completely useless rather than situationally useless. In the future, it's totally possible that my opinion on this changes. Kaldheim brought us Finn the Fangbearer, and it's not like Infect is a storm scale 10 mechanic. If the quality of the card pool increases drastically, I could see that balance shifting, and the singleton multiplayer nature of the format won't be enough to offset the increased relative potency. For right now though, I think the rule is pretty fine where it is. I want to know what you think though. Does Infect impact your games in a big way? Do you play Infect? If it does, or if you do, be sure to weigh in the comments below. I love reading them. And as always, if you want to get a hold of me, you can join the Spike Colony Discord. It's not behind a paywall, and there's a channel specifically for talking about Commander Advisory Group related things. Or if you're on Twitter, you can reach me at JimTSF, or you can contact the Spike Feeders at thespikefeeders@gmail.com. I'm Jim, I'm your Spike on the mic, and thanks for talking Infect with me today. Hey, thanks for checking out the Spike Feeders on YouTube. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure you click that subscribe button. And you can click this link to check out our other great videos.